Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm TJ, and today we're going to be talking about how to reuse your code using Git Submodules. Something that I know a lot of us are told is reuse your code and write code so it's reusable. Well, how do you do that? The trick that I've found working with large teams has been to use Git Submodules. What is the submodule? It is a code repository within a code repository, or code repo within a code repo. They're a little tricky to work with, but they're really not that bad. It takes a little bit of playing with to get a good grasp on them, but once you get a handle on them, they're such a time saver, and sharing code between projects. Say you find a bug in your code, you fix it once, update the repos on all of the other projects, and the bug's fixed. You don't have to go and apply the fix everywhere. It's just pull code and you're done. So if you're familiar with Git and the basics of Git, you'll be able to do submodules no problem. So let's get into it. Alright, so we're on the GitLab new project page. What I'm going to do is create a couple blank projects, and from there what we'll do is clone them into VS Code and then start working with submodules. See you there in a second. Alright, code repos are cloned. As you can see here, I'll make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see what we're doing. We have our main project. This could be anything that you're working with, so your game dev project, application, website, whatever. As long as it's a code repository that you're actively working with, this would be it. This other repo up here is just, right now it's an empty repo, and it's kind of the easiest way to do it when you're creating a submodule is you have to create a new repo that's going to be shared, copy all your library code into it, and then commit to it, and then there's your shared code library. If you already have one of these, awesome. It could also be a remote repository for a project you're working with, or something like that. But in our case, it's just an empty repo. Actually, both of these are empty. The only thing they have in them is the default README, but that doesn't matter. The important thing is we have two repos to work with. Moving from there, the first thing we need to do is just know that this code library, it's outside of our project, so you can see where we're at. We're on the desktop in a folder for tutorials, in another folder called Submodules. We do an ls here. I'm running a Linux terminal on Windows. You can see we've got a directory for code library and main project. That matches what we're seeing here, but code library is currently outside of the main project. So how do we use the submodule within the main project? Well, to get started, we need to first cd into the main project. And you can see we're there. So what we're going to do is first run the command git submodule add, and then I'm just going to paste in the URL for the shared code library repo. Once we run that, it's going to clone the code library repo, just like a normal clone, into the main project, but the submodule add does a couple things differently. The first thing is it adds this .gitmodules file. It's it's very similar to a .gitignore, but in this case it's for submodules. So we can see here that it created a submodule called code library, puts the path relative to the .gitmodules file, and it also contains the URL for the code repo. That's awesome, and we can see here that it cloned code library within the README. Or we can see that it cloned code library within our main project. what this allows us to do is now we can clone multiple shared libraries that we're using. So I know in one of my projects I like using the lit.json library for C#. I can just clone that into my project as a submodule. I don't have to clone all of the code and keep track of it myself. I can leave that to the other developers to do and then just pull changes as needed. This workflow is a little bit different, and I'm going to go over some of the things we need to do for that. Let me clear this and start working on it from there. Alright, so the first thing we need to do before we get much further with submodules is we need to commit our code library repo to the project. So what I'm going to do here is run a git status. We can see everything's staged, ready to commit. All I have to do is run a git commit and say we added the code library submodule. Get that committed and pushed. Alright, that's committed, pushed. If we were to go to the kind of the tree view for the main project, we could see that code library is now a permanent member of the repo. That's all good, but how do we actually start working with them and modifying code if we need to? Well, let's clear this. First thing I'm going to do is on code library, I'm going to create a new file. This could be, say you're working on a library, you need documentation. We can add documentation, we can add more code. We can work with the library as it works with our project. Something to keep in mind is this code will be shared across multiple projects at this point. So if you're using it and then you clone on another repo that you've added it as a submodule to, you may need to restructure your code and abstract it a little bit so this can be shared. It takes a little bit of practice, and it's a lot of fun to do, but just keep in mind that is what we're doing here, is creating a lower level to work with and then abstracting it at the higher level within our main project. But for this example, I'm just going to add documentation. So add a documentation text file. This is a doc file. Actually, incorrect. It's a txt file. So we'll do that. We'll close it. We can close Git modules. Now, here's where things will start to differ from what you're used to, especially if you're using command line. If we run a git status, we can see here that this has been added to the project and it's untracked. If we run git status, the only thing that's changed here is our code library. We're not seeing documentation in the status as it's been added to the project. And this is where it differs. So the way submodules work is they're actually a pointer to a repo's commit. And that's the only thing that your application that added, or your repo that added it as a submodule keeps track of. It's just the pointer. What lives on the file system is different. But the only thing Git cares about at this level that we're at in our project is the pointer to code library. So to actually commit the change, we have to go into the code library, and if we run a git status here, we can see documentation's been added. So working with a submodule, you have to, if you're adding code, you have to go into the submodule, do any of your git changes here, and then go out another level and commit them at the project level as a pointer rather than committing all the code at once. This prevents you from having to duplicate code, especially if you have large libraries. You won't have to keep track of a bunch of different versions of stuff. It's all within this repo, and you can manage it from there. So it's going to make more sense, I think, visually once I do it. So what I'll do here is do a git add for documentation, and I'll do a git commit, and added documentation. All right, we'll do a git push. All right, so code library has push code, and that's all we had to do on the sub module side. Thing that changes here is we have to go up a level and do a git status. Now we can see there's new commits within the code library because within it we have changed where the submodule is pointing in the repo itself. So all we have to do here is git add for the submodule, and then do a git commit. And the comment I usually use for this is just updated pointer. You can be a little bit more verbose on it. You can say updated pointer for your code library, whatever. This also will let you change to specific commits within these repos, and then you don't have to manage that version. You just stay on that commit and you're good. The project's not going to change which commit you're pointing to unless you tell it to, and you have to go into the submodule to change that. At this point we should be good to go and just do a git push. Now whoever clones this repo should see that documentation lives within code library. Alright, moving on. How do we clone a repo with a submodule in it? It's a little bit different. There's a couple different commands that need to be run in a specific order. If you don't run them, you can either backtrack, or I can show you another way to fix it if you're working within a project and just add a submodule and what you have to do. It's not terrible, but let's get started with that. So how do we clone a repo with a submodule in it? It's a little bit different. The only thing that really changes, we have to add a flag on our git clone. If you forget the flag, there's another way we can go in and initialize the submodules properly, or you could just delete the folder you just cloned and reclone it with the flag if you forget it. Both are valid options. It just depends on what you're trying to do. I'm going to show you both ways to do it. First, we're going to clear our terminal window and go from there. First thing we need to do here is go up a level, and now we're in the parent submodules folder up here. So if we do an ls, we can see both of our repos. The command we want to run here, I'm just going to copy it from my other screen, is we're going to clone another main project with a very specific flag. So pasting this in, we can see it's git clone. That doesn't change. The URL for our project, that doesn't change. And the part here that's different is we're adding this -- recursive. What that will do is when we clone it, it scans through the repo and says, hey, are there any submodules here? If so, let me reach out to those and pull them in and clone them as we're cloning. It's all recursive does, is it's running the same command and cloning everything as needed. For this example, I'm going to add another folder into our submodules directory. I'm going to call it main project recursive, so we can see how this works in a separate library and make sure everything looks correct. So if we run this command, we can see it's cloning, and it resolved everything properly, cloned it, and now it went down another level and hit code library, which was our submodule, and it's cloning that and getting everything set up. Opening up the main project recursive, we can see, oh hey, code library's here, and we can open it up and we can see documentation and everything's matching and is where it should be. From here, this is where things are going to be a little bit different, especially if you've forget that recursive flag. So what I'll do is clear this window and go back up here and run the same command and add non-recursive to the folder. So we're changing the path it's in and getting rid of the dash recursive flag. If we run this, we can just see it cloned main project non-recursive, but there's no code library in here. We can see close this one, here's non-recursive. We can see this exists, but it only exists as a pointer because that's all Git sees it as. What we have to do from here is we have to go into the project directory, so main project non-recursive, and then if we do an ls, we can see code libraries here, but if we go into code library, run ls, nothing's there, as we were seeing in this view over here on the left. So let's go up, and the command we have to run here first to this is git, I can type. So the command we need to run here is git submodule init, and once we run that, it goes through and it's any submodules that are in the project. We can see it found code library and registered the path for code library. If we open this up, still no code. How do we get the code? This is the important part. What we have to do is run another command. It's git submodule update dash recursive. Once we hit enter on this, it will clone any code that's in the repo at where your main project is pointing to for code library. We can see specifically that it's looking for this hash on the commit. And that's how we clone if we forget to add the dash recursive flag. If you have a large project and don't have to sit here and do this for several of them, it's real easy to just delete the repo and add the submodule flag for recursive in, and then you're good to go. Alright, so now let's talk workflows with these. This is where it can get a little bit tricky, especially if you're working with the team and people are adding code to the submodules and you're working on stuff, and it's just normal Git and source control with the team. But from here, what we'll do is clear this, and let me go up a directory and we'll just do a rm-rf on main projects non-recursive. We don't need that in here. It's just going to clutter up the view, and it's going to make this a lot easier to follow. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's go into our main project. So pretend this is you and you're working with a teammate that's working in main project recursive. If you add another, say, documentation to txt, and we'll do the same thing where we go into code library, git status, let's add it and do a git commit, and added more documentation. Git push, go up a level, status, we can see this has changed. Code library and commit that. Updated pointer. This is all fine and good on our end. If we go to the other repo for main project recursive, so this first part was working on your machine. This would be if you're working on another computer or it's your teammate that has to pull your code and your change that you just did. Instead of having to reclone the entire repo again, because that's not what source control is for, we can just do a git pull and see the change. Oh wait, I did not commit that. Let's go back up to main project, push. Now it's committed and pushed. Let's go back to main project recursive. Now if we do a git pull, we can see that code library is the only thing that has changed here. And that's what's showing on our project right here. That's all that changed in this repo was the pointer to code library. The thing that we have to do here is run the command git submodule update -- recursive. Once we do that, it's going to check out code library at the new commit that we're pointing to on our main project. And that's all there is to submodules. They're, like I said, they're simple to work with, but you have to work with them to really get the feel and the workflow to actually get anything done with them. Now that we've done that, that has shown exactly how we do a submodule workflow. It, like I said, it takes a couple more steps, but we're not duplicating code. If we go up a level back to our code library that's outside of our project in the submodules folder, and we do a git pull. Since we're on the same branch on all of these, we can see we've got all the changes, and that's all we've had to do to duplicate the code, use the same code across multiple projects without having to copy and paste anything. And this will work for any Git repo that you're using. So you're working on game dev, like I was saying before, and you have shared code. This will let you use that same code across all of your projects. Hope that helped. Planning on more tutorials like this in the future. Let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I will catch you in the next one. TJ out.